to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. We're coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam. Hello, Charlene.
Hello, good afternoon, Alma, and good afternoon to everyone. I am Charlene Navaja from your ABC Vietnam Bureau, bringing you the latest news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. Philippine Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said the Duterte administration is right not to take the 2016 landmark arbitral ruling on the South China Sea before the UN General Assembly because it is already part of the international law.
Two Thai workers were killed in southern Israel by rocket fire from Gaza on Tuesday, police said, raising to 12 death toll in the Jewish state since the conflict broke out.
Royal Brunei Airlines is trialing the International Air Transport Association's or AITA Travel Pass app, which allows passengers to show proof of vaccination and meet other health requirements.
One of my family members.
And members of the Indian diaspora in Singapore are coordinating efforts to help their homeland as a relentless wave of new cases swamps the country.
First, in the Philippines, Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said the Duterte administration is right not to take the 2016 landmark arbitral ruling on the South China Sea before the UN General Assembly because it is already part of the international law, and doing so would only risk turning Manila's loss of possession into Chinese right. But while already a part of international law, Secretary Locsin said the document for now cannot be used for the purpose of retaking possession of what China took from the Philippines, apparently referring to the Scarborough Shoal because we let it. The secretary said the award in itself is already brilliant for its abstraction after ruling that none of the features in the Spratlys generates maritime rights. He also said the arbitral tribunal trashed historic claim as a basis of right because history yields to law. Therefore, if China held on to and got more, the reefs would be within Philippine territory under UNCLOS. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration concluded that all high tide features in the Spratly Islands, even the largest island, Itu Aba, are rocks that do not generate an exclusive economic zone nor a continental shelf. It highlighted that China has no possible entitlement to an EEZ overlapping that of the Philippines in the Spratlys. In a special meeting with President Duterte last Monday, former Senate President Juan Ponce Enrile agreed that there is no need to bring the award before the UN since the decision was already based on UNCLOS.
The Philippine government on Tuesday night firmly rejected China's unilateral fishing ban in the South China Sea, saying it violates Philippine sovereignty and sovereign rights. The supposed moratorium runs from May 1st to August 16 and covers waters north of 12 degrees north latitude, which encroaches area on Philippine territory and exclusive economic zone or EEZ, including the Bajo de Masinloc. In a statement, the Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, told China that it cannot legally impose or enforce such a ban in the West Philippine Sea. The UNCLOS, or the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, is an international treaty that provides a regulatory framework for the use of the world's seas and oceans to ensure the conservation and equitable usage of resources and marine environment. The DFA also said with the new Chinese Coast Guard law, which effectively grants the latter freedom and authority to use force within what it considers its maritime jurisdiction. The fishing ban puts at risk the legitimate rights of Filipino fishermen to fish in Philippine territorial waters and EEZ. The department fired off the diplomatic protests against the Chinese fishing moratorium on May 17.
In the related news, Malacanang said the ongoing maritime row between the Philippines and China will not hinder plan to possibly hold a joint exploration for oil and gas resources in the disputed West Philippine Sea. Take a look.
Kaya nga meron pong usapin na habang hindi pa nare-resolba kung sino ang merong soberenya dyan sa areas na yan, baka posible na joint ang magiging exploration and exploitation. No? So patuloy pa yung usapin na yan dahil sa iba't ibang parte naman ng daigdig, itong mga issue na ito ay hindi naging hadlang para makinabang ang lahat sa tanging yaman. Sa katunayan po, yung langis sa Middle East, sa ilalim naman po ng lupa, wala naman pong territorial boundaries yan. No? So nagkakaroon po sila ng usapin kung paano jointly madidevelop ang tinatawag na straddling resources. At pagdating po sa joint exploration sa karagatan, marami na po tayong mga model na pwedeng sundin dyan at nakikita po natin na po pwede naman pong pag-usapan ang mga bagay-bagay na ito sa panig ng mga magkapitbahay na matalik na magkaibigan.
The Philippines and China signed a memorandum of understanding on joint oil exploration in the West Philippine Sea during the visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping in the Philippines in November of 2018. And the MOU is the basis for the two governments to negotiate on an accelerated basis arrangement to facilitate oil and gas exploration and exploitation in relevant maritime areas consistent with applicable rules of international law. The two countries sought the joint exploitation of natural resources in the disputed waters under the proposed 60-40 sharing scheme. On July 12, 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, Netherlands, invalidated China's 9-dash line, a geographical marker Beijing invoked to assert its extensive claims in the strategic waters. The Duterte administration has stood pat on its policy to promote Philippine claims and settlements or entitlements, as well as manage and resolve disputes through peaceful means.
Two Thai workers were killed in southern Israel by rocket fire from Gaza on Tuesday, said the police, raising to 12 the death toll in the Jewish state since the conflict broke out. In the last wave of rockets that landed in the Eshkol region, 2 people were killed. Police spokesman Nikki Rosenfield said, identifying the dead as workers from Thailand. A week ago, a Thai national was wounded by another rocket fired from Gaza, and a farm laborer from Thailand was killed in the 2004 Israel-Gaza war. Megan David Adom, Israel's equivalent of the Red Cross, said 7 other foreign workers were wounded by shrapnel in the last attack, one of them seriously. They were all taken to Soroka Hospital in the southern town of Beersheba. According to the United Hatzalah Volunteer Rescue Service, the Gaza rocket hit a packaging factory near the border.
Meanwhile, the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA, said it's ready to assist overseas Filipino workers in Israel who are in need of emotional well-being support. Administrator Hans Leo Kakdak said assistance is being readied for workers in the host country who are experiencing trauma due to the conflict there. Take a look.
Kasama po dyan ang physical and mental wellness ng mga OFWs that na assistance that we will provide. Sa ngayon, meron ng mga helplines, may mga hotlines ang Polo at OWA at Assistance to National Section ng Embassy kung saan pwedeng tumawag. Pwede pong makipag-usap, pwedeng magdulog doon ng hinaing o nararamdaman, karamdaman o sa loobin ng ating mga OFWs. May makakausap po sila. And then yung ating malawakang physical and mental wellness assistance can be further enhanced and developed as the days go by. Pero sa ngayon kasi, as I mentioned, ang top of mind natin ngayon is the physical safety.
He also said they will provide more assistance to the OFWs in the Jewish state once the situation there improves. There are 30,000 Filipinos working in Israel, majority of whom are caregivers.
The UN on Tuesday appealed for $943 million to cope with the Rohingya humanitarian crisis, fearing that a COVID outbreak in South Asia could reach refugee camps before vaccines do. The agency said the funds were needed urgently this year for nearly 1 million refugees from the Muslim minority who fled to Bangladesh from neighboring Myanmar after a deadly crackdown in 2017.
$40 million, meaning 36% of this plan have been funded. This morning there were several pledges, but several other countries said they will consider contributing going forward. This is very important. It is important that the Rohingya crisis is not forgotten as action is taken, hopefully, to address the political crisis that is affecting Myanmar now. Hence the importance of this appeal, and hence my plea to you, the media, to help us echo the urgency of contributing substantively in support of the Bangladeshi effort. The solution, in spite of the challenges, needs to continue to be sought, pursued in Myanmar. This is why UNHCR and other UN agencies and NGOs are also present and continue to be present in Rakhine State, working to try and create conditions for people to return. Clearly, this has not happened so far because besides the work that we do, more action needs to be taken on the Myanmar side in terms of freedom of movement, access to services, ending the discrimination that has caused, in fact, the exodus of people into Bangladesh.
Besides Rohingya refugees, it seeks to meet the needs of 472,000 Bangladeshis in affected host communities. Grandi said that a military coup in Myanmar on February 1st should not overshadow the plight of Rohingya refugees who have largely not felt safe to return to Myanmar since the 2017 crackdown.
The exodus of people into Bangladesh.
A UN General Assembly meeting set for today or for yesterday was to discuss a non-binding resolution on halting arms transfers to Myanmar was postponed indefinitely because there was not enough support to pass the text that, according to diplomatic sources, the authors did not have the support they expected in order to pass the motion with a large majority of the Assembly's 193 member countries, according to one diplomat. Another source said that they wanted more time for negotiation, especially with ASEAN nations. The text was drafted at the request of Liechtenstein with the support of 48 countries, including Britain, the EU, and the US, but with South Korea as the only Asian country signed on. South Korea's support came after several weeks of negotiations in an effort to gain the backing of at least one ASEAN country. The resolution, which would have been non-binding but politically powerful, called for the immediate suspension of the direct and indirect supply, sale, or transfer of all weapons, munitions, and other military-related equipment to Myanmar. It also asked for military authorities in Myanmar, which took control of the government operations in a coup back in February 1, to end the state of emergency and to immediately stop all violence against peaceful demonstrators. It also demanded that the military immediately and unconditionally release President Win Myint, State Councilor Aung San Suu Kyi, and other politicians under arbitrary detention. The resolution also called on Myanmar to swiftly implement a consensus plan to restore democracy that was reached at an April ASEAN meeting, and to allow a visit from UN representatives, which has so far been blocked. And finally, the draft resolution called for safe and unimpeded humanitarian access. And the school semester is postponed to get more teachers vaccinated. That is a report coming live from Thailand. Here's Gila Pablo. Hello, Gila.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, Alma. That's right. This update is from Bangkok Post. Alma, for the second time now, the Ministry of Education has announced to delay the start of the semester, which is originally from June 1, and they move it to June 14 because of the coronavirus situation here, and also to give teachers and other educational staff more time to get vaccinated against COVID-19. The postponement of the semester was also agreed by 98% of Bangkok teachers after conducting an online survey on social media last Saturday. Education Minister Trinak Tiantong added that schools in red and orange zones may open on June 1 or before June 14, but must assess their readiness using the Thai COVID Plus online portal and must seek permission from their provincial communicable disease committee, except for those schools in the dark red zone, including Bangkok and 3 nearby provinces. They must remain closed but may proceed with online learning. Exam schedules will still end on October 15, according to the ministry. Meanwhile, the Bangkok Teacher Club, or BTC, has petitioned the Ministry of Education to reconsider the school opening until the COVID-19 situation here subsided. Stated in the petition, Alma, that the current pandemic is serious, making teaching in schools too dangerous for the students, and increase in vaccination rates won't stop the virus from spreading, since vaccines need more time to build up immunity in humans' body. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Gila, for your updates there. Looking forward to more updates coming from Thailand. Stay safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alma. Same to you. I'm Gila Pablo reporting live from Bangkok, Thailand, and we live in interesting times.
Tourism experts sees lesser tourists this year. Alfred Balmes from EBC Malaysia Bureau. Alfred?
Hi, Charlene. Yes, you're right. If Malaysia has recorded more than 26 million foreign tourists in 2019, and just only 4 million last year, prepared for a shock. Because according to tourist expert, just 132,000 foreign tourists are likely to land in Malaysia for a holiday this year. Data from Tourism Malaysia shows that 4.3 million international tourists arrived in Malaysia last year, compared with 26 million and an 83.4 decline. In an interview with a local newspaper here, tourist and transport industry consultant Y.H. Chan told that countries in the Asia-Pacific region, including Malaysia, had been hugely popular destinations for international tourists. However, his estimate suggests tourist arrival this year will drop by 96% compared with last year. He also said that industry recovery will ultimately depend on the rate of COVID-19 infections. It was reported that according to the World Tourist Barometer of the United Nations World Tourist Organization, Asia and the Pacific region recorded a 96% drop in international arrivals in January compared with the same month last year. The report also mentioned that globally, there has been an 80% drop in tourism last year compared with 2019. And based on the current trend, international tourist arrival will drop by another 85% in the first quarter of this year over the same period in 2019. Meanwhile, Malaysian Associations of Hotels Chief Executive Officer Yap Lip Seng said the UNWTO data is reflected of the situation on the ground. Yap said it may take up to 2024 for Malaysia tourist industry to recover to pre-pandemic levels. Malaysian Association of Tour and Travel Agents President Datuk Tan Kok Ling said the fall in tourism has a big impact on the nation's economy as tourism is a huge contributor to GDP. Tan added the future of the tourism industry in the country is very uncertain as there are so many variables in play. Tan also said that while neighboring destinations such as Bali and Phuket are looking to reopen soon, there is no sign that the same would be happening in Malaysia. Back to you, Charlene.
Thank you so much, Alfred, for your update. Stay safe and healthy.
You too. Reporting here from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, this is Alfred Balmes. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Alfred. And we'll be back right after this short break.
This portion is brought to you by Security Bank.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eagle news, because we live in interesting times.
Kumanta, sumayaw tayong lahat. Saya-saya.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. And in Singapore authorized the use of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine to teenagers aged 12 to 15. Officials said on Tuesday in a first for Asia. The city-state's Health Sciences Authority extended the use of the vaccine, currently only approved for individuals aged 16 and above, after reviewing clinical data submitted by the manufacturer. And let's listen in.
Health Services Authority, HSA, has also extended authorization for the use of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for individuals aged 12 to 15 years. And our expert committee on COVID-19 vaccination has also weighed in on that endorsement, with their endorsement. So both teams have assessed that the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine demonstrated high efficacy and safety for this age group of 12 to 15, and which is consistent with what we have observed for the adult population. So MOH will work with the Ministry of Education, will provide allocation, and MOE will plan out the vaccination for this group, which are all in schools, and MOE will provide further updates soon.
The city-state tightened restrictions in recent weeks after several new clusters were found, including one linked to a tuition center. Singapore announced Sunday it will close schools, warning that new coronavirus strains, such as the one first detected in India, were affecting more children. In the latest round of restrictions, the city-state limited public gatherings to 2 and banned restaurant dine-ins. About 1.4 million in the country of 5.7 million have received both vaccine doses, with efforts so far focusing on vulnerable groups, frontline workers, and those above 45. Starting Wednesday, the time interval between doses will be extended from 3 to 4 weeks to 6 to 8 weeks to allow more people to get their first jab, officials said. Those aged between 40 to 44 will also be invited to get vaccinated. Last year, the coronavirus surged through crowded dormitories housing low-paid foreign workers, infecting tens of thousands. But by global standards, Singapore's overall outbreak has seen mild. Officials have reported more than 61,600 cases so far and 31 deaths since the start of the pandemic.
Meanwhile, in Cambodia, the country began its COVID-19 vaccination for Phnom Penh's general population as the country is speeding up inoculation drive amid infection surge and more people die from the virus. Cambodia is planning to vaccinate at least 10 million of its 16 million population. Let's listen in.
ខ្ញុំមកតាំងពីម៉ោង6 កន្លះហើយដល់ពេលបានចាក់វ៉ាក់សាំងហើយខ្ញុំមានអារម្មណ៍ស្បើយអត់សូវភ័យស្រួយអីចឹងណាហ្នឹងហើយបានឆ្នាំការពារអីចឹងណាចាពេលដែលចាក់ខ្ញុំមានអារម្មណ៍សប្បាយចិត្តស្អីអាចជាការពារខ្ញុំបានមួយផ្នែកខ្ញុំអាចជួយកាត់បន្ថយបានតែមកតាមតាម
The country has seen COVID cases surge since February when an outbreak was first detected among its Chinese expatriate community. On Tuesday, the Health Ministry announced 345 new infections and 2 more people died from the virus, bringing the total cases to 22,889 with 156 deaths. Authorities have transformed schools and wedding party halls into COVID treatment centers as hospitals are running out of beds, and Prime Minister Hun Sen is also warning the country was on the brink of death from the virus outbreak. Phnom Penh and adjacent city Tak Mau were under lockdown for 3 weeks, and despite the blanket was ended on May 6, some areas with high infection rates remain under lockdown. The country has so far vaccinated more than 2 million people.
And here in Hanoi, hundreds of local journalists receive AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines as the country battles its highest ever number of domestic infections. Vietnam had more than 1,200 local COVID-19 cases across nearly 30 localities since 27th of April, with 187 local cases recorded on Sunday, the highest daily spike since the beginning of the pandemic in the country last year. Vietnam also recorded a new COVID-19 death on Monday, raising the total virus death tally to 37. Around 1 million people, about 1% of the country's population, have been inoculated against COVID-19. Most of those vaccinated are frontline workers in the COVID-19 fight and medics at local hospitals. Several measures have been deployed to curb the spread of the coronavirus in Vietnam, including lockdowns in districts with high numbers of COVID-19 cases and limits on large gatherings. People who have been in close contact with COVID-19 patients or entering Vietnam are being subjected to a 21-day mandatory quarantine.
And back here in the country, the National Capital Region and 6 provinces will be needing some 3.3 million doses of COVID jabs monthly until herd immunity is achieved by November or December this year. Metro Cebu and Metro Davao, on the other hand, should get more or less 300,000 to 350,000 doses each month. A steady supply of coronavirus vaccines will be the key to the government's goal to achieve herd immunity, particularly in high-risk areas, according to Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., the chief implementer of the National Task Force against COVID-19, and he said this on Tuesday during a palace briefing. The government is focusing its vaccination program in the NCR, Bulacan, Laguna, Cavite, Rizal, Batangas, Pampanga, Metro Cebu and Metro Davao, all considered high-risk areas. The government targets to vaccinate 50 to 70 million this year to achieve herd immunity.
A 7-year-old Malaysian is one of the 2 cases of COVID-19 linked to a new cluster in Singapore, according to the Republic's Ministry of Health, or MOH. The student at Yuhua Primary School had last gone to school on May 14, said the ministry in its full data release late last night. Also, another family member of the student, a 36-year-old Malaysian cook, at Spring Court Restaurant is also linked to the same cluster. Both test results came back positive for COVID-19 infection on May 17. The first case of the cluster involved a 64-year-old female Singapore permanent resident who is currently unemployed, with the two Malaysians being the household contact of the elderly woman who was confirmed to have COVID-19 infection on May 15. Meanwhile, two other Malaysians are linked to Changi Airport Terminal 3 cluster, which currently has 87 confirmed cases. One of them is a 36-year-old Malaysian woman who has tested preliminarily positive for the B.1.617 variant and is pending further confirmatory tests.
And the head of the World Health Organization warned that the global pandemic isn't over yet, despite high COVID vaccination rates in some countries. Take a look.
Ryan, Executive Director for the second week in a row, there has been a global decline in cases and deaths from COVID-19. There is a huge disconnect growing where in some countries with the highest vaccination rates, there appears to be a mindset that the pandemic is over, while others are experiencing huge waves of infection. The situation in a number of countries continues to be very concerning. The pandemic is a long way far from over, and it will not be over anywhere until it's over everywhere.
Dr. Tedros' comments came 4 days after the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention updated its public health guidance to say fully vaccinated people no longer need to wear a face mask or stay 6 feet away from others in most settings, whether outdoors or indoors. It's the first time the federal government has encouraged people to stop wearing masks since the agency first called for face coverings more than a year ago. He also called on COVID vaccine manufacturers, including Pfizer and Moderna, to make more shots available to COVAX, which supplies doses to poorer countries.
Brunei has added Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka to its travel ban list following soaring COVID-19 cases across South Asia. All foreign nationals departing or transiting through the 4 countries will be barred from entering Brunei from May 17. The Prime Minister's office said in a statement on Monday. The government has also extended the suspension of travel to and from India until at least June 13 as the Indian COVID-19 variant B.1.617 continued to overwhelm its healthcare system. The travel suspension also applies to foreign nationals who have been granted pre-approvals to enter Brunei from the Indian subcontinent, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangladesh via pre-authorized flights. Exit approvals to the 5 countries will not be granted, except if a person's employment or dependence pass has been canceled or revoked, or they hold a special authorization work pass or professional visit visa. Diplomatic passport holders and members of the armed forces departing from the 5 countries will be allowed entry to Brunei. Brunei has maintained an outward travel ban imposed on Brunei residents since March last year, except essential travelers.
Back here in the country, Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. assured that his job as the country's vaccine czar and chief implementer of the National Task Force against COVID-19 is not interfering with his role as presidential advisor on the peace process. Amid the pandemic, Secretary Galvez said other officials of the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process, or OPAP, are working on the normalization in the Bangsamoro region. Take a look.
Po yung Office of the Presidential Advisor on Peace Process ay matagal na po nanahandyan po, more than 18 years na talagang tumututok po tayo sa Bangsamoro Peace Process. Marami po tayong mga tauhan, lalo na si Yusek Purisima at saka yung ating mga execom na talagang nakatutok po dito sa ongoing implementation ng normalization at saka political track ng Bangsamoro. Sa kasalukuyan, Sir Melo, ang peace agenda po ng OPAP ay 6 na peace agenda po yan. At talaga pong tinututukan po namin ang lahat ng mga tinatawag natin mga rebel groups para magkaroon ng tinatawag na normalization at magkaroon ng tinatawag na peaceful productivity dito sa mga areas na nasasakupan ng mga different rebel groups. Sa kasalukuyan, bukas po pupunta po kami sa Cotabato. May emergency meeting po kami kay Haji Murad. At ako po ay lumalabas din po sa Senado para po sa extension ng BARM election. So sa ngayon po, nakita po natin na kahit na marami po tayong tinatrabaho, nandiyan naman po sila section at ang ating mga kasama na mga tinatawag natin na mga different cluster groups na talagang very professional. At ang nakita natin, saan lang po yan, paghahati-hati lang po ng ating panahon para magkaroon po tayo ng focus doon sa 3 binigay po na mission sa akin po ng ating mahal na Presidente. At tomorrow, meron po yata tayong tinatawag na launching, yung Bangsamoro National Trust Fund.
All right, as we heard there, Secretary Galvez announced the government will launch the Bangsamoro National Trust Fund on Wednesday. Officials will also visit the region to talk about the extension of the Bangsamoro transition. He added various groups earlier called on Congress to expedite the amendment of laws postponing the elections in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao or BARM. Ibrahim is the interim chief minister of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority. The transition plan for the region is set to be completed in 2022. However, due to the pandemic, regional leaders are pushing to extend the Bangsamoro transition phase until 2025.
Five suspected members of Philippine militant group Abu Sayyaf have been shot dead in a firefight with police on the Malaysian part of Borneo Island. Police were attacked by men armed with guns and machetes Monday when they raided a settlement near the town of Beaufort in Sabah State and returned fire. Sabah Police Commissioner Hazani Ghazali in a statement said 5 male suspects were successfully defeated. They were believed to be from the Abu Sayyaf group, police said, self-proclaimed Islamic militants whose stronghold is in the Muslim-majority southern Philippines, not far from Sabah. One of them has been identified as Mabar Binda, a militant leader on the Philippine police's wanted list. Abu Sayyaf, which has distant links to the Islamic State group, has been responsible for some of the Philippines' worst terror attacks in recent years. They have carried out bombings as well as kidnappings of Western tourists and missionaries since the 1990s, often operating in poorly policed sea areas bordering Malaysia and Indonesia. And ASEAN in Focus, we'll be right back after a short break.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights, sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
An official of the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, or PEZA, said the agency remains optimistic on investments from Japanese companies despite the coronavirus pandemic. In his personal social media account, PEZA Deputy Director General Tereso Panga shared that Japanese firms invested 716.22 billion pesos from 1995 to April this year, accounting for 27% of the total 2.63 trillion peso investment approvals in PEZA for the past 26 years. Panga said when it comes to Ecozone FDI, or foreign direct investment, the Japanese have always been Ichiban, or number one investor of PEZA. He also said Japanese investments to the country can be further boosted by tapping more into the Philippine-Japan Economic Partnership Agreement, or BIJEPA, to improve market access to Japan. Another prospect for the Philippines is getting more Japanese investors is the policy of the Japanese government to subsidize its China-based small and medium enterprises and large export manufacturers to exit the Chinese market.
And also in the Philippines, the National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, said the speed of vaccinations and the distributions of vaccines in areas with high COVID-19 numbers would help the economy recover faster. Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick T. Chua told reporters in a briefing on Tuesday that NEDA intends to propose to target areas with high COVID-19 cases for vaccination to boost economic growth by inoculating more Filipinos in these areas. Chua said consumers will have a greater confidence to spend. Consumption is a key economic driver of the Philippine economy. Chua said other factors that will help hasten the recovery include the decision of the government to allow greater mobility under the Enhanced Community Quarantine, or ECQ, and modified ECQ imposed in March. He said this is better than last year's decision to close down 70% of the economy. The decision plunged the Philippines in a deep recession, which was particularly felt in the second quarter when GDP fell 16.9%. The worst since the Second World War. Last week, the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, reported that GDP contracted 4.2% in the first quarter of the year, marking the economy's fifth consecutive quarter of decline.
In other news, the U.S. aviation regulator is ordering Boeing to inspect older generation of 737 jets after the January crash of an aircraft off Indonesia that killed 62 people. All Boeing 737-300, 400, and 500 planes will need to be examined, a total of 143 aircraft, according to a document from the Federal Aviation Administration seen by AFP on Saturday. A failure of the flap synchro wire missed by the auto throttle computer, which manages the plane's thrust, could result in a loss of control of the plane, according to that document. An interim report from Indonesian investigators in February said the doomed jet's throttles showed an anomaly, though it said the cause of the crash was still unclear. But it said the inspection is necessary to address the identified unsafe condition that could be found in the planes, which were built in the 1980s and 90s. A Sriwijaya Air Boeing 737-500 plunged about 10,000 feet in less than a minute before slamming into the Java Sea on January 9, minutes after taking off from Jakarta.
And in Thailand, the economy shrank in the first quarter, official data showed Monday, as it was battered by coronavirus restrictions that have hit the key tourism sector hard. The kingdom last year suffered its worst full-year performance since the Asian financial crisis of 1997, with a 6.1% contraction. The Office of the National Economic and Social Development Council, or the NESDC, said gross domestic product shrank 2.6% on year in the first 3 months. The NESDC also gave a cool forecast for the recovery, cutting its 2021 growth outlook to 1.5 to 2.5% from its previous estimate of 2.5 to 3.5%. With the tight travel restrictions already reducing the usual flow of foreign visitors to a trickle, Thailand has been hit by a third coronavirus wave, triggering fresh curbs on economic activity. Thailand has recorded just over 111,000 COVID infections, the vast majority since the start of the latest surge in infections, which began in April. Officials reported 9,635 new cases on Monday, the highest for a single day, driven by more than 6,800 infections in prison.
And back to Brunei, the Royal Brunei Airlines is trialing the International Air Transport Association's or AIATA's Travel Pass app. This allows passengers to show proof of vaccination and meet other health requirements. Royal Brunei said in a statement that the mobile app will enable passengers to securely verify that they've met the COVID-19 health requirements for their journey. And through this app, AIATA seeks to provide governments with the confidence to reopen borders without imposing quarantines on inbound travelers. The app also aims to pre-validate travelers prior to arrival at airports to make airline and security processes faster. RB Airlines CEO Captain H.J. Kalidakan H.J. Asmakan said the app and Brunei's recent vaccination rollout are a positive step towards safely reopening borders. Hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, the national carrier has had to suspend the majority of its flights and retrench foreign pilots to stay afloat. Brunei's borders have remained shut since March last year, with authorities yet to lift its travel ban on residents.
And members of the Indian diaspora in Singapore are coordinating efforts to help their homeland as a relentless wave of new cases swamps the country. Building on her experience of getting equipment for a family member battling the virus, day trader Seema Devgan is coordinating efforts to send oxygen concentrators to India. Let's take a look.
That, one of my family members, very close family members, got affected with COVID. She's still going through it. And we had to arrange different kind of resources like a medical nurse, oxygen cylinder, concentrator for her. And through that process, I realized that we could still arrange it because we are privileged, we can afford it. But there are many people who cannot do that because they do not have money, they do not have access to resources. And I could help them get those resources. So that's how I got involved in the campaign. Said that generally what we used to do was financially contribute and we used to think our work is done. But this is something, unprecedented kind of a situation. It's not those kind of campaigns where you can just contribute, somebody on the ground will take care of it and do that.
As a first generation immigrant to Singapore, we feel very blessed to live in a country where things work well and, we are safe. But we also, having moved here at an age where we very well understand the challenges and problems on the ground, I just feel there's no option to sit and watch if a disaster like this unfolds. COVID, we all have families back, so the helplessness comes from both sides. How do we help those who are very needy? But also, how do we help our own families in a way? They are also exposed. We've all lost friends and family. Everyone I know has lost friends and family. So
I think that's good that if we need to get, let's say,
temples, mosques, gurdwaras, and churches, regional and business associations, family groups, and informal networks, they all spring into action when a typhoon or flood strikes. But few disasters have been quite so testing as the current coronavirus outbreak engulfing the nation. No matter how much money is raised, empty drugstore shelves can't be magically refilled. Oxygen generators and concentrators have to be located, ordered, and shipped before they can start saving lives. A shattered healthcare system cannot be rebuilt overnight. Members of the diaspora know they must do what they can, no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem.
To children, blankets.
It's good they can help their family back home. Thank you very much for keeping me company always. Stay safe. Have a great week ahead.
You, Tom. Thank you so much. And to everyone who watched, this is Charlene Navaja of your EBC Vietnam Bureau. We live in interesting times.
And I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.